Hi, Leah Bowring here, going to let you in on some tips and ideas for setting up your studio at home, how to do so safely. Today I'm in my studio. I have a studio within a studio apartment, so I'm making wet clay objects in an apartment that is itself a big open space. So I am very aware that it's a privilege to be making in your house, and as such you need to make sure you care for everyone in your house by staying clean and keeping your workspace safe. So basically what you need to keep in mind, that anytime you're using clay, bits might get on the floor and you don't want to step on those bits of dry clay. When clay becomes dry, it's hazardous and it becomes small particles when broken down and becomes airborne, stays in the air for about 3 days and you can't see it, and you can breathe it though. To mitigate that, it's good if you have a window if you can open. Now, right now in California, we can't do that. So avoid stepping on your clay, firstly. If you do have an air filter, that's great. I do have a designated one for my clay space. I'm very much pro clean air in my house, so we have 3 or 4 air filters going on all the time. So that's just if you have that desire. Otherwise, you can just use a sponge to clean up any bits on the ground. So we don't want to use a broom when cleaning our space. That creates airborne particulates and we don't want to breathe that, like I said. So brooms are off limits. You could vacuum it, not as ideal as just taking a wet sponge and grabbing the bits, even if they're larger, and discarding in the garbage. So let's see what my workspace is. I would like to recommend having a table, ideally, if you can. Now, I have a pretty ideal space in that I designed this table to be a standing desk, so it's about 42 inches high, so that I can stand. But if you don't have that option, it's not a big deal. You can, of course, sit at a dining room table, and let's talk about the work surface. The work surface must be porous. It must have the ability to absorb water. So you don't want to be working on a space that's too pristine that you can't get wet. That would stain, for example. So if you have a nice kitchen table, then we need to cover it with a bed sheet or a canvas material. It's best if the material stays taut and tight, if you clip it somehow or put some heavy books. If not, that's okay. Also, you can buy canvas, so that's another option. So let's talk about how we deal with our clay discard. We never want to see clay go down the sink, because what happens is it clogs the drains. And if you don't see the effects, your landlord will, and then the city will. It'll catch up with you. And often artists are kicked out of studio spaces because they don't properly take care of their professional practice. So, and then they make it impossible for other ceramic artists to enjoy a community in some spaces. So be very mindful of how you are disposing of your clay. So clay is crushed up rock and other natural mined materials that we find in different places in the world and mix up together to form a recipe for clay if you're buying it commercially. So basically it's decomposed granite and other types of minerals. So it's safe to put back outside. There's no additives that are toxic in their unfired form. So clay itself is safe, though it's technically a chemical by definition. It's not a hazardous chemical. So clay can go in your backyard. So let's talk about water. I have a little bit of clay water. I'll scoop out of my bucket over here. So if it's like clearish, that is fine to go down the sink. But when it starts getting hazy with particulates, thicker, you want to allow, so let's say I have a clean bucket of water I use every day. So this is how I work. I take a bucket of water about this tall, and this is 52 fluid ounces. This bucket I use, and I use it to clean my workspace, to keep that clean. I also minimally use it to add water to my art projects. After each day of use, though, you let this settle. So the next morning, there would be a separation of thicker chunks down here, and then more cloudy clay water up there. So the chunks never go down the sink. Ideally, nothing goes down the sink, and you just toss that water that's here in an outdoor space, maybe to water plants. And actually, you want to do it more conspicuously than that, because it does have a color to it. So if it's visible, you want to either dig a hole and not dirty up the landscape, basically, if there's flowers. But I do actually water plants with it if I'm outside. So yeah, we just want to avoid water or clay going down the sink because it clogs and adds up over time. So yes, what's next? We need to talk about how, so that's just phase one. Phase two is if you feel like you use your studio a lot and you're looking for a little more education on how to set up a proper studio in terms of larger amounts of clay being used per day, needing to have more than one bucket used per day for your practice. So I have a system set up over here. So let's say you're throwing and you have discard from the throwing water, and you need to clean your splash pan, which is this pan that comes out. I do so in a bucket that is about 5 gallons with a lid. You always want a lid on any bucket you keep overnight, including the bucket I was showing you earlier. You don't want cats to knock it over, or wind, or things like that. Just try your best to keep that from happening. So I clean my splash pan, my tools, anything with a lot of thicker clay in here. And I clean this out probably about once a month. So the goal is, with that system, I just let it sit in there longer. And there's going to be a lot more discard, a lot more clay chunks at the bottom. And having a separate wash bin like that kind of allows me to wash other things that are non-clay related if I need to, because that's not going to be recycled clay. So what do I mean by recycled clay? So this is a topic that is more advanced in the way that I'm going to explain it. I'm going to do a reclaiming, recycling little demo for you separate for those of you that are just getting started in clay. But if you have a designated space and you want to set up your space to include enough accommodations for reclaiming, when you happen to have things get dry, like bits of clay, I throw them in here in my dry bin, which is on wheels. If you can have everything on wheels, it's great. And this is plaster. It's a plaster disc. And below it is my wet gooey clay that is from here. So I take like 5 handfuls over here and add water or throwing slip. And then I bring that up and recycle it on the plaster. If you don't have plaster, you can use like a bed sheet or just a wooden tool, or excuse me, a wooden surface, porous surface. Let's talk more about what everyone's going to need for their projects. So I'm done talking about advanced recycling for now. You're going to need some kind of various, maybe just 2 boards, wear boards, not laminated, not sealed. So if they're ceramic tiles, they should just be not glazed. And these are to transport your work from A to B. You know, if you're going to work outside and you want to wrap it up indoors, you need to move your piece. So it does help to have some kind of board. Now you could use a book with a piece of newspaper on it. That would work fine. So don't feel restricted to having to purchase something for this class or for your home experience, whichever way you're going about it. So yeah, have some wear boards, and that should be it for now.